YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back. Today, I'm giving you the most underrated NFL players at each position heading into 2021. You guys are also playing along on our Twitter. Ask for your guys' opinion, so it's pretty good to see the different variety of answers. Definitely a lot of different options for some of these position groups. It's tough to choose one, but that's what I went with here. So I'm excited to break it down. Full NFL coverage on the channel. Cannot wait for the season weekly picks, score predictions, power rankings. You guys know the drill. Join us for all of that and more. Like, subscribe, follow us on Twitter, trying to reach 10K. Always talking during live NFL games, constant NFL updates, news, keeping you guys involved as well. Here's our Twitter. Again, at GoatHouseNFL is a link down below. Please give us a follow and join in for the fun here. I'm always asking you guys this question. It's really good to see all the different answers here. There's some similarities that I have here that we're about to talk about in a lot of these, so it's good to see these here. If you have just one answer, one position group that you feel comfortable about, if you want to list all of them, that's awesome. So starting with quarterback. Quarterback, there's really no glaring most underrated in my opinion, but I went with Baker Mayfield here. And there's a couple different options. You can debate a guy, at least I can, a guy like Lamar Jackson, because sometimes I don't think people understand how valuable of a player he is. But he gets the hype. You know, everyone knows he's a very, very talented player. But again, there's no like, yes, this guy is extremely underrated quarterback. I don't really think there's any of those. There could be as the season goes on or after the end of the season. I went with Baker, though. I think people are still kind of hesitant to buy in on Baker Mayfield, maybe because of the 2019 season. But last year he was very solid. Remember, that's a new system, totally different system. And I thought he played extremely well in that, West Coast offense, a lot of play action. I think he's very underrated in his ability to use his legs in it. We've seen a lot of third downs or maybe some fourth downs where he just had to, put his head down or lower his shoulder and get that first down. I thought that really stood out to me. But not only gaining yards as a runner, but even in the passing game, getting, on those bootlegs, getting outside, being able to throw on the run. Some damn good balls on the run, actually. So I think he's a little underrated in those categories. I think there are a lot of people who kind of just stuck on is he even good at this point. And I definitely think he's proven that he's good. Can he improve at this point? Can he continue to improve? Second year in this system under Stefanski, with this still feels like a new Browns team. He needs to show that he can prove. I believe that he can. So I'm going to go Baker here. But again, quarterback isn't a position where there's like, there's underrated guys everywhere like some other position groups here. Running back, I'm going to go with Gus Bus here. Gus Edwards of the Ravens. I think when people think about the Ravens running back, they think J.K. Dobbins first. Very talented, got a lot of upside, so understandable. And people were even thinking about Mark Ingram. I think there's probably some people that believe that losing Mark Ingram is a pretty big loss, but people just forget about Gus Edwards and how well he fits this Ravens offense and how solid he is. I don't think he gets enough credit for his physicality too. He's a guy that'll run you over. People don't realize that. When there isn't a hole, he has to create a hole himself. He has to get that extra yard for the first down for the end zone. He'll lower his shoulder, he'll put his head down, and he'll run you over. And, we already know he's pretty damn athletic. He's got very good quickness too. So I actually think he's an all-around back, and it feels like he's getting better. And it's a team where running the ball is just that important. The most important, it's probably that number one running team in football. There's a few other teams that really value running the ball, but and having a guy like Gus Edwards lead the way, to me, in my opinion, this is the guy that's led the way. Will he still lead it? Is J.K. Dobbins going to step up that much? And he was down the stretch this season, but I don't think Gus Edwards gets enough credit. This is actually a legit number one running back, and people will not say that. They will not give him that credit. So we'll see how he does this year. We'll see how they divide up Dobbins, Edwards. You definitely do need to divide it up because those are two very good running backs there. So got to go with Gus Bus here. I don't know if there was a long list of running backs. I guess there's some. You can think about Ronald Jones. I thought what he did last year to step up. Marlon Mack, people kind of forgetting about him mainly because they got another guy, Jonathan Taylor, in there in Indianapolis. So there is a few running backs here I guess you can debate, but Gus Edwards stands out to me. Receiver, definitely quite a few options that are worthy of the number one spot. I went with Courtland Sutton, though. Maybe it plays a part that he missed last year, so people kind of forget about him a little bit, but even going back to coming in the league, I thought this could be a future potential top 10 receiver, and I don't think really anyone gave him that credit. And then not this past year because he missed time, but 2019 season, he played lights out. And the way he played, it wasn't a top 10 receiver quite yet. He probably, based on that season alone, he was pretty damn close to that, actually, based on that season alone, around that range, which people forget. People didn't give him that credit for. But based off that season, it's like, okay, this guy actually, because he's still young, he just came in the league, he's just getting going. This guy could be a firm top 10 receiver in the future based on how he's developing. And I don't know if anybody really gave him that credit. And again, I think people are forgetting because he was hurt last year. This is really a do-it-all receiver. You look at his body type, big body receiver. We know he's good at contested catches. He has great hands. But people don't realize this is a guy you can give the ball to underneath, a screen pass, a slant. And the biggest thing that people don't realize is how good he is after the catch. You just people don't give him that credit. You wouldn't think he's that great after the catch, but he's actually very dominant after the catch. Mainly because of his physicality. I think he's actually got pretty good vision, knows where to run, but he breaks tackles after contact more than any receiver in the NFL. I guess debatable going forward, but that year he was definitely at the top there. So I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves in those categories. There's a lot of receivers. DJ Moore, I strongly considered. He's starting to get some hype, but he's another do-it-all type guy. He's nowhere near Courtland Sutton, body type, nothing like that's the same. But in terms of he can really do it all. You give him the ball downfield, you can give him the ball underneath, he can run the ball like a running back almost after he has the ball in his hands. And he'd go up and catch it, contested catch-wise. So DJ Moore's pretty underrated. Tyler Boyd, another one. I would argue he's the best true slot receiver, but he also can play outside. It feels like he's getting better. There's a lot. Robert Woods is pretty underrated. Jarvis Landry's always been underrated. There's a long list of receivers here that you can really, really talk about. I went with Sutton, DJ Moore, Tyler Boyd, strongly considered here. So there's some good ones. Tight end, I went with Logan Thomas, who really broke out last year. And I don't think people realize how well he played last year and where he's come from. He was a quarterback turned tight end. He gets that contract extension, and I thought that was a cheap contract. Nobody's really on the same page with me on that, but I thought so. I think he's just getting going. Tight ends usually can last a bit into their 30s as well. Again, he played quarterback for some time, so it's not like he has the wear of playing tight end, blocking, getting in the trenches for a long time. So I think he has plenty left in him for sure. And he was sneaky good last year. They use him in multiple different ways. You look at him at blocking, in the run game, getting downfield next level blocks. You see him in terms of a receiver, whether it's, underneath, in the middle of the field, outside, down the sideline, deep down the sideline, contested catch. A lot of underneath where he had to go, make something happen after the catch. And he did that. He's a huge piece to that Washington offense, that new Washington offense there. So I thought he's pretty underrated. There really isn't a lot that stand out for tight ends. Trying to think who you can argue here for this. I think Hawkinson was. People weren't ready to hop on that train because he was too young, but I think people are now. Maybe a guy like Jonnu Smith, I think he all-around game to him. I'm excited to see what the Patriots have in store for him. Gesicki, Higbee, maybe slightly underrated for those guys. Maybe I underrated Higbee in the past too, so that's why I thought about him. But I thought Logan Thomas really stood out here. I think about a guy like Kyle Rudolph too. It's hard to put up here because he doesn't really do much up until the red zone. But where he's underrated is I actually think he is in. You can debate that he is the best red zone target in football, which I don't think a lot of people give him credit there. But it's hard to put up here because that's really all he's used for these days. He is definitely declining. But yeah, I guess I'm convincing myself there's a long list of tight ends that could be up here for this in this category. Moving to tackle, we're going to go Brian O'Neill here from the Vikings. Not talked about enough. Usually you're as good as your unit. Usually guys look worse because what's around them is pretty bad, and they don't really shine. They don't really get the full potential or look good until the unit is good. We've seen that time and time again. Brian O'Neill looks like a stud, even though the Vikings have debatably one of the worst offensive lines in football. And there's actually people out there that'll actually, who is the Vikings' best offensive lineman? Is it This guy's at that, it's not even a question. I'm surprised that I see that, it is not even close. It is not even close. Brian O'Neill, their right tackle, is by far their best player, and I think he's a damn, you combine pass protection, you combine run blocking, I think he is pretty damn good right tackle there, pretty good tackle. And coming in, too, out of Pittsburgh, you knew he had the quickness, the footwork, the athleticism for a tackle, but was he going to have the strength, the power? And I think what he added in that category is pretty impressive, too. So I'm going to go Brian O'Neill there. You would think he would struggle a little more because what's around him, but he's been fantastic. Guard, I'm going to go Elgton Jenkins of the Packers, and he's starting to get some love out there. He is starting to get some love. There isn't a ton of guards that are underrated in my opinion, but I mean, what this guy did last year, I don't think people realize, what he's been doing, switching positions like crazy, going against kind of that top guy. See him go against Aaron Donald. I think it almost feels like they line him up where he's needed most, whether it's if somebody else is hurt out at that position, but also that spot is going to go against the best guy on the defensive line. So they're using Elgton Jenkins for that, which is crazy, a young player. So it's not a big name probably because a young player. He wasn't supposed to be this good. So I think that's why people are a little hesitant to jump on board now. Again, he is starting to get some hype. But I think people, make the mistake, okay, who's the best tackle? It's this guy in football. It might be Bakhtiari, but that's besides the point. Who's the best guard? It's Quentin Nelson, Zach Martin, whoever it may be. Who's the best center? It's this guy. And Elgton Jenkins doesn't really fall under the category of maybe top 3 or whatever in any of those, but what he's able to do and how high of a level he's able to play and go against the best at pretty much across the board really stands out to me. And just so valuable to a team like the Green Bay Packers. So I'm going to go Elgton Jenkins there. Center, I'm going to go Ben Jones of the Titans. Extremely consistent. Every single year it feels like he's a top 5 center, but no one discusses him towards the top. Got a few big names at the center position. Even some young guys get thrown in there, and then you really hear about Ben Jones. I could be because he's got such a generic name. It sounds ridiculous, but Ben Jones, you hear the name Ben Jones, and people probably go, wait, who is that again? I think it's because of his name, but he's been extremely consistent, very good in terms of run blocking, which is very, very key at the center position, but for the Titans offense as well. But again, I think center's been pretty hot and cold lately. Even the really good ones, they're like, okay, this guy's what a year, and then, not so much. Can we get a consistent one? I think Ben Jones has been extremely consistent and a big piece of that Titans offensive line. So I went that route. Defensive tackle, I'm going to go with Seahawks defensive tackle Poona Ford here. Young defensive tackle on the rise. It was weird. I thought about, defensive tackle. I sit down, I think about guys. First guys that come to mind, I'm like Poona Ford, Jaron Reed, I always like Quentin Jefferson's game. I think he's pretty underrated. I'm like, all those guys are either a Seahawk or former Seahawks. So I thought that was a coincidence. I think it was interesting. And there's more than just that as well for interior guys. But I thought those guys popping in my head was pretty funny there. I did strongly consider Jaron Reed, who is now at the Chiefs. He's been extremely impressive to me. He had that suspension, which kind of threw things off. I think it threw other people off too, like kind of forgot about it a little bit. But I go Poona Ford, big piece of that Seahawks defensive line last year. Not a whole lot of pass rush. It's very important to them to stop the run first. That's why they have Poona Ford, but he also gets some pretty good interior pressure. I think he can continue to add that as well. It's a guy that you can line up nose tackle, straight over the center. You can, off the shade there, off the side of the center, you can line him up over the guard. Defensive tackle, nose tackle. You can line him up different spots because of his strengths, his power, and his. It's one of those guys. A lot of the time when you watch a game, you'd realize, that guy, that running back just ran into a wall. It's Poona Ford. There's not too many guys that in the NFL that you consistently say that they look like a wall. Man, that guy just ran. He almost got clotheslined and ran in a wall. It seems like a Poona Ford that steps up, a lot for them. And I think he's growing. I think he's getting better here. And he wasn't supposed to be this good either. It wasn't not supposed to be this good. So I think we start giving him some more love here. The Seahawks certainly are. They believe in him tremendously here for going forward. They're able to move on from Reed because they like Poona Ford so much. But moving on to edge rush, I'm going to go Brian Burns. I think Brian Burns, and he does get some love. People are realizing he's good. He's a good young player, getting better, has potential. But I think, I seem to be maybe not alone. There's probably other people out there, but pretty close to being alone that I think Brian Burns needs to be in the conversation with the other big-time edge rushers. Yes, those guys towards the top, because I think he's on the verge of really just going crazy, on a season and just outplaying those guys really. And coming in, question, what kind of edge rusher is he? And the Panthers, even while they've had him kind of switch schemes a little bit, and he's shown that he can fit either scheme, so that's really not a worry at all. A collection of pass rush moves. He was so close to just getting a lot more production last year. I noticed. I watch a lot of football. I noticed what he's capable of, and I think he's about to just really, break loose here in terms of the production, and then people will start to realize a little more because, unfortunately, the specific stats of, sacks will, which he's been productive in those categories, but that is kind of what will allow people to recognize the guy. So I think Brian Burns will kind of get into that category this year. I think this was Darius Smith's title. I've been calling him extremely underrated, but people started to realize how good he is, how much of a factor, more of an impact guy. I think, Bud Dupree is another one going from the Steelers to the Titans. There was a portion of it last year I was like, this guy's in the running for at least my defensive player of the year because I thought he was more important than he had the production too, but I thought he was made more impact plays, was more important to helping his teammates than what people realize, if you watched every snap. That's kind of like Zadarius Smith, so that's why those guys are in that category. Jason Pierre-Paul, I think, is pretty underrated. He took a lot of bashing throughout his career, was pretty hot and cold, and then all of a sudden he's on a hot streak, staying consistent. So that's good to see. Romeo Okwara, there's a lot of edge rushers we could talk about here. But I want Brian Burns because I think he actually should be in the conversation of the top tier guys, and I don't think there's really no one giving him that love. Maybe there's Panthers fans out there believing that much. Good, but I don't think there's a lot of people giving him that love. Linebacker, I'm going to go Zach Cunningham here of the Texans, and you see the guys that are consistently mentioned at the top are consistent linebackers. You take a look at Bobby Wagner, consistent his whole career, consistently good tackling machine. Eric Kendricks, same thing. Demario Davis, same thing. And everyone it's very easy for them to put them at the top. Guys like Fred Warner, they're just very good, very flashy, and getting better. So it's easy to put guys like that, Darius Leonard, those guys at the top as well. But over the course of the history of NFL, it's always been that consistent tackler year in and year out. And to me, that's Zach Cunningham, but it doesn't sound like he's in the conversation with those Wagner, Kendricks, Demario Davis, which thrives in similar ways, very, very consistent like that. You know what you're going to get from him. So it's surprising that he's not talked about with those guys. Those guys are considered better right now. That's definitely understandable. But and I guess he's a little younger too, and he's still getting better. He's definitely still getting better. So I think it's all going to take maybe one more season here, and then he's in that conversation. So it's just one of those linebackers. I think, and there was a bit where it felt like most maybe not Texans fans, they realize because they watch every single snap. But I think most NFL fans that can't catch every single snap of Texans football, maybe those people probably would have said Benardrick McKinney was their best inside linebacker. It seemed like that was the bigger name, and he probably was right when Cunningham came in, but it did not take long for Cunningham to actually take that title. But I don't think most of the world really realized that. And then you get guys like almost like no-name guys like Tyrell Adams getting thrown in there, and they're looking better than what they're supposed to be. I think Zach Cunningham's kind of creating for his teammates what's around him there as well, and people don't realize that. Texans had just an atrocious defensive front last year. I mean, he had to carry an insane amount in that front seven, like ridiculous amount, So I think another year, and I think people will start to realize, I think he kind of put his name in people's heads after this past year. But we'll see. Cornerback. I don't know if there's a bunch of standout guys for quarterbacks, one of those cornerbacks, but it's one of those positions. I'm going to go with TRAE Waynes. Didn't play last year, so I guess it's easy for people to forget about him as well. And he got that big contract before that. I think there's a reason the Bengals gave him that contract. Two, I think people ripped the Bengals for giving him that contract. And for some reason, I think it's kind of stuck with people. Wayne's early years in his career has really stuck with people, and they can't really get it out. And he struggled a lot early in his career. But I thought he completely flipped the script and broke out of that, and I don't think people realized. I think a lot of time in Minnesota, Xavier Rhodes was the big name, but the last year or so there, Wayne's was their best corner. To me, it wasn't a question, actually, and I don't think people realize that. And remember, what do I always say about corners? Not always, but a lot of the time they start off struggling. It takes time for them to get their prime. I always bring up Stephon Gilmore as an example. Struggled early on, then was pretty solid. Then he goes to the Patriots. Then all of a sudden it's hitting 30 years old and he's the best corner in football. That's kind of how it is typically, unless you're Jalen Ramsey. Alexander seems to be a rare piece as well. But that's kind of how it is. So TRAE Wayne's struggling early and then kind of getting going and then getting that big contract because they're paying him for the future for what he's going to be. Hopefully the injury didn't affect him that much. That all makes sense to me. And also I like to factor in that he's been, I'd say, last time we seen him play, the best or one of the best tackling corners. He flies up. He's a very consistent tackler. That's kind of disappeared from today's NFL. You can literally count on one hand the guys that can consistently do that. So you got to respect that. You got to appreciate that. And the Bengals, that's a big reason they brought him into their tackling once the ball got to that next level. The secondary, awful. Before they got TRAE Wayne's, or, I guess he's going to play for them, so it's still been pretty bad. A little better last year. So they value that a lot, but I thought he was getting a lot better in coverage too. So I think there's a reason why they pay him that money, and I think people forget about him and they don't realize that. Who else can we factor? I don't know if there's a whole lot of underrated corners. Darius Williams maybe entering that conversation from the Rams. Maybe some slot corners. Maybe the slot corner position in general. I suppose is a little underrated. You could start talking about Kenny Moore, Troy Hill, guys like that. I suppose Bryce Callahan, but TRAE Wayne stands out to me. So I went with him. Safeties, I'm going to go Jabril Peppers. And Jabril Peppers, there isn't a bunch of standout ones for safeties. Like, that guy's extremely underrated. I think Jesse Bates was. I've been trying to hype him up for some time, and then he went absolutely off last year, so people realize that. Guys kind of show that they don't belong in that underrated category anymore, that they're just, they're rated correctly. Justin Simmons, there's not a whole lot. To me, I'm going to go Jabril Peppers. He was actually hyped up a ton, almost too much coming out of Michigan. It's because he was such a flashy player. He got his hands in the ball, a lot on defense, but he was so flashy in special teams, and he's still a factor in that as well. But constantly getting the big yards, that big score, and then Michigan would give him the ball on offense, actually. So he's just such a flashy player that it created crazy, crazy hype. And everyone just wanted to see that flashy player still coming to the NFL. And nobody continues to be that flashy, really, whether you're touching the ball in every single category, going from college to the NFL. It's just a totally different ball game. So people were kind of underwhelmed by him and just like, all right, he's just a safety and he's not the best safety. So everyone just died off on Jabril Peppers. So, and I think that kind of went for him going from, I don't want to say overrated, but overhyped to underrated, really, because of all that, what I just explained. I think he's kind of a do-it-all safety at this point. I thought he had an extremely good year last year. He's a guy that you watched last year, and I love the guys that when you watch them, you could tell they were in the film room. And everyone's in the film room, but when you could tell that they really picked up on things in the film room, for that specific game, to me, I don't know. That stands out to me. So I think he's becoming more instinctive of a safety, not just a flashy guy. I think equal in coverage, playing in the box. I think he kind of plays his own game too, which I like. He's going to trust his own instincts. So he's kind of just an everywhere type of safety. So specifically the safety position, he's ahead of schedule to me. But I think you ask most people, everyone's like, that guy was hyped up so much. Is he that? I think people look at it the wrong way there. So I put Jabril Peppers in there. I think he's actually, that Giants secondary is pretty loaded, pretty deep. James Bradbury's a fantastic corner, standout guy. But I think Peppers was kind of that heart and soul of that secondary, I suppose. So I went with him. Kicker, I'm going to go with Jason Sanders of the Dolphins. Big time year last year, extremely consistent, was able to hit the deep kicks, wasn't missing, so extremely consistent. It's hard to pick a kicker out, but I guess it wasn't that hard to pick Jason Sanders here because talk about the big time kickers. Everyone's going to throw Justin Tucker out there, Harrison Butker, maybe, Lutz. We're going to hear the same names over and over again. And then Sanders is a guy that outplayed those guys last year, and we're still really not hearing his name. So that'd be the reason I go with Jason Sanders as my pick for most underrated kicker. And punter, I didn't really have there's no major underrated punter. I went Pat O'Donnell for the Bears. They call him Mega Boot over there. Had to punt a lot last year. A lot of three. I had to punt often for Chicago last year. A lot of 3 and outs. So tough to do, I suppose. But I think there's kind of been a rotation of punters kind of getting respect and kind of getting in the Pro Bowl. It's really tough to get in the Pro Bowl as a punter, obviously, just one from each side a year. But yeah, the same, Bailey started to get some respect. Hecker got some respect. I mean, it's just this kind of the same guys. Kern's a fantastic punter. Same guys, big name guys on a rotation who makes Pro Bowl, who gets the respect. And then to me, Pat O'Donnell was kind of towards the top in terms of consistent punting, getting the ball inside the 20, not punting out the back of the end zone often. Seemed to be a problem with that around the league. And was crucial for the Bears to help the Bears defense out. Bears got a good defense, so if you put them in the right spot, that's going to help them make a play. And the offense was really struggling a lot of 3 and outs, and it felt like O'Donnell was out there every 2 seconds, punting. And there's guys that punted just as much as him, but it felt like, he rapidly had to come out there a lot. So, and then being consistent, So I think we're rotating through the few big names, kind of getting the respect for them being consistent. But here's another consistent guy that he's not as good as those guys, but yeah, maybe deserves a little more respect in that category. This really isn't a punter that's like, yes, he's underrated. There's been a few positions like that. Some positions there's even guys I didn't mention. I can go down a list of guys that I think are underrated. And this is something that definitely change. It can change by week once the season starts. It's just based on the hype and what mainly fans. I think fans decide this here. So it's pretty cool to talk about, something we can revisit for sure. Again, I'm seeing your guys' thoughts, your guys' opinion on Twitter. Definitely good to see that. Sometimes there's so many players in the NFL. There could be somebody that says this guy's underrated. I might go, oh yeah, that's right. He is. So it's good to see that. So join us on Twitter, link down below. Please give us a follow, like and subscribe to the channel. Full NFL coverage. We got tons planned like we usually do for the NFL season and the rest of the offseason, of course. So cannot wait. I am pumped. Preseason is here. Got you covered for that as well. But that is going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.